Court will recognize the Honorable Reed Prosper on behalf of the defendant. Mr. Prosper, how much time would you like for me to let you know when you've used?
Let me know when I've used 20 minutes.
Yes, sir. May proceed.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for your patience, the time that you've spent listening to the facts of this case. If I thought I could get by with pulling up a chair and sitting down and just having a conversation with you, that's what I'd do. I long since quit flattering myself to think that I was going to make any comments that was going to change the opinions or mindset that you've got about listening to this case. Your collective intelligence and judgment about what you've heard, and the common sense that I know you're going to employ in this particular matter, far transcend any graduating the bottom half of my class words that I might have to tell you at this point in time. I have a few comments I want to start off by just answering Mr. Mitchell, and then I'm going to go to the court's charge. These won't be my words, these will be the judge's words. He stood up here and basically, if you look at what he says, the first thing he says is he wants you to ignore the conduct of Genevive Dawes and Virgilio Rosales. And I was talking to my wife the other night, just telling her generally short Reader's Digest version about the facts. And, you know, at some point in time she looked at me and said, "Isn't it ironic?"
I'm going to object this point with regard to anything that his wife said.
All right, you're not, the objection's overruled for purposes of illustrating. Go ahead, Mr. Prosper.
Isn't it ironic that the people that created the facts and circumstances surrounding this incident, that is, the ones that set it all in motion, that caused the conduct on behalf of the others, for the other officer's safety, that Officer Hess had to use because they put him in this position? Isn't it ironic that he's the one that's on trial here? And you know, folks, that pretty much capsulizes it all. That pretty much capsulizes it all. Mitchell asked you to find whether or not the actions are reasonable. Now I want to ask you this. Is there anything that one of you could possibly point to that the occupants of that vehicle did that were reasonable that evening? What would a law-abiding, upstanding, not committing crimes, not scared of what you're going to find in this vehicle, not scared of what punishment I'm going to be looking at because of my actions that led them to be here to begin with, wouldn't have rolled down the window and stuck out their hands? And if you've been on the force, I don't care whether it's 10 days or 10 years, your apprehension level, and you're going to be sitting there thinking, just like Joe Samples, Joe Ordinary Citizen, was. What are they hiding? Why aren't they complying with the commands? And I know, I'm glad it was brought out, that one of y'all back in that jury room during your deliberations would have said to the others, you know, if they had just pulled that car up to the rear bumper of the Dodge Journey, they couldn't have moved, they couldn't have left. Why didn't they do that? Well, now you know why. It's an order from the city that they not do that. It's a fireable offense. It's basically the city saying, we don't want our property damaged by them backing into it. We value that more than we do the lives of the officers. It's a misguided policy by people that sit in a well-lit room and don't go out on the street and don't have to deal with the Genevive Dawes and Rogelio Rosaleses of the world. She wasn't going home that night. He's saying, well, don't you know she would have liked it? She wasn't going home that night, folks. Best case scenario, she's going to jail for multiple felony offenses. What can they be thinking? Each and every one of those officers out there on the field said they were desperate, they would do anything, and we're doing everything to get away. Again, not the norm for law-abiding citizens, and again, increasing the anxiety level. And getting back to who put them in the position, who put Officer Hess in a position where he has to tunnel in and focus in on that car so that, in the words of their expert, an expert that's paid a bunch of money, and don't you know he's figured out that if I come down here and don't toe the company line, I'm not getting called anymore. And yet in 3 years, he doesn't think it's important. He doesn't think it's necessary to interview any of the officers that were out there. And I'm going to go into that in a minute. I'm going to go into all the witnesses. And each and every one of those people, police officers on the scene, civilian that was on the scene, officers that weren't there but looked into this, come to the same conclusion. Come to the same conclusion, folks. That those officers were at risk, their lives were in danger, and I forget which officer it was, I may be able to find it in here in a minute. Something bad was going to happen if Officer Hess hadn't acted. And officers were going to get hurt that evening based on the actions of the two people that were in that car. And again, you've got to be asking yourself, why? Why would they continue to get away? You know, I'm kind of like Joe Samples. I get up in the morning at 4:45 and I walk my dog. And if I'd have gotten up, or anybody, local track team doing cross country, somebody walking their dog, if they had been walking that animal or running on the other side of that fence that evening, as she accelerates and tries to go through that fence, thinking that she was going to be able to because it's flimsy and it's dilapidated, she's got no way of knowing that there's a wrought iron fence on the other side of it, or storm fence. If she had gotten through and injured one of those kids on the cross country, injured me and my dog, injured somebody, you all would have been sitting there and you all would have had one thought. Why didn't they shoot? How many more red flags would there have to be before we're going to stop this madness? Are the inmates just running the asylum? Is that what we need to turn it over to? Should all the officers just turn around and look at each other and say, gosh, bad day for us. They just don't want to comply. They don't want to listen to us. I guess we better get in our cars and leave. and let them continue the crime spree, let them continue putting people at risk, and just go on about their business. Is that what you want? I don't think so. I don't think so. He says, you've got to find, if you don't find that there's a substantial risk, a person that will cause death or serious bodily injury, what do you think they were heck bent on causing if they could have gotten through that fence? Or they could have gotten that car turned so they could have headed out. Somebody was going to get injured. Somebody was going to get injured. And again, they keep talking about Hess's belief, is it reasonable? Their own expert tells you, again, that it is. Because when you get the tunnel vision and you're taught to focus on the threat and not take your eyes off that threat, I forget what words they use, but basically it blurs or blocks out your peripheral vision. They put him in that position by their actions. And so when he's shooting, he can't see that they've moved. They cause that. Now, let me tell you what the court tells me before I get back onto the evidence and witnesses in this case. An indictment is no evidence of guilt whatsoever. I told you the court would put that in the court's charge and give it to you. These are not my words. These are the court's words. All persons are presumed innocent, and no person may be convicted of an offense unless each element of the offense is proved beyond a reasonable doubt. The fact that a person has been arrested, confined, or otherwise charged gives no inference of guilt at his trial. The law does not require a defendant to prove his innocence or produce any evidence at all. The presumption of innocence alone is sufficient to acquit the defendant. Now, as you've had a chance in this particular case to see the presentation of witnesses, to see the questions were asked, which of these two tables would you count on to bring you the whole story, to try to get the facts out, to try to let you know exactly what happened? Because what you saw up here and heard from several officers is we told them. We told them what went down. They didn't want to hear it. And how's their way of dealing with that? They just don't call them. They just think, you know, they can pick like little snapshots out of all of the evidence and throw that at you rather than you have the whole picture, because the whole picture doesn't suit their purposes. The whole picture tells you this man's not guilty. The state must simply exclude all reasonable doubt about the person's guilt. That's what the judge tells you. That's another way of saying you must be 100% free of reasonable doubt. 100% free of reasonable doubt. Again, you view this from the actor's standpoint. No person said out there at the scene that I don't understand why there was a shooting in this case. The people that didn't shoot tell you they either would have shot but didn't because they weren't in position, or somebody was in front of them, or they were blocked. But had they not, there at least two of them said we would have shot. They put on the Lane evidence to try to say, I didn't perceive a threat, therefore there was no threat. That's not right. That's not the way that it was. She told you on cross-examination, not through something they brought out. I was getting out of the way. I was not in a position to shoot because of the position I was in. That's why I didn't shoot. Not that there, she said, I'm not saying that there was no threat. It's just that I wasn't threatened in the position I was in. Now, folks, I was trying to listen and write. And yeah, my hearing aid batteries went out. But if I'm saying something that's not the way that you heard it, this lady right here took it all down. She's going to throw something to me for telling y'all this, so she'd have to go back. If y'all have a dispute, she gets to type it up, and let me promise you, she didn't miss a word. But y'all have the ability, if you think I'm saying something that's not the way that it is, to go back and get it. And I urge you to do so if you have doubts. And you get down to the fact of justification. And now, they wanted to trot out in the autopsy. Remember the medical examiner that came in here and they said, well, did you have a manner of death in this particular case? Yes, we did. What was that? Homicide. And they would have loved to have left it at that had y'all gone back and said, ooh, the medical examiner said this was homicide. He must be guilty. That's not what he said. He said homicide just means that this person died at somebody else's hands. It's not a conclusion about a legal definition or about the facts of this case. It's merely a homicide. He then added, of course, there's justification. Just like it's 3 a.m. in the morning, somebody's creeping up your stairs, and they're armed. You've got a right to go out and shoot that individual if you feel it's immediately necessary to protect your family. It's justified. That's what we have right here, justification. Just like homicides, autopsies, homicides can be justified. And the judge tells you that 3 separate instances in this particular fact situation that apply. Deadly force in self-defense, deadly force in self-defense of a third person, and deadly force by a peace officer making an arrest. It is a defense to prosecution that the conduct in question was justified. You are instructed that a reasonable doubt on the issue of justification requires the defendant be acquitted. The defendant is not required to prove that the conduct was justified. Rather, the state must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the justification does not apply to the defendant's conduct. A person who has a right to be at a location where the deadly force is used, who is not provoked. Hess has a right to be there. Hess didn't provoke this conduct. And he's not engaged in criminal activity at the time the deadly force is used, is not required to retreat. He can stand there as a reasonable person charged with protecting the public and try to talk sense into people that ain't having none of it and try to keep them from doing what these other officers told you they were going to do if Hess's action hadn't saved lives that night. And like Samples tells you, they were desperate. They were not complying with anything, and what is going to come out of that vehicle next is what he told you. And you've got deadly force to protect a third person. The actor reasonably believes it's immediately necessary to protect that third person. And what do the other officers out there tell you? That's where we thought they were. It was a reasonable belief. He's thinking it's immediately necessary. Okay. They know. You now know that they know. And they've had 3 years to talk to Virgilio Rosales. 3 years. If there is a fact that would have come out of his mouth that would have benefited them, you'd have heard it. They know they will be arrested. These people in the car know they're going to be arrested for a stolen vehicle, a stolen gun, and evading arrest. Now you think about it. The normal things, if you're a law-abiding citizen, you're not going to violate the law because it's not the right thing to do. They way beyond that. They don't care. The fact that they're facing 10 years in the pen is no deterrent to their actions that evening. What does that tell you about their mindset and where the lengths they will go? And if they had gone out there and gone through the fence, some supervisor is going to be looking at Hess and saying, how many more red flags would you need? Now, what's there? What do they do with people that don't suit their purposes? Officer Embry, veteran with the Sheriff Department. They've used him before. His figures don't match what they need for their theory of the case. Now, do you think they're going to call him? Or what are they going to do? Man, we got a problem here. We got a problem here. Tell some investigator, get on the phone, find somebody that'll take whatever money it takes to get down here. And we'll just pretend Emory doesn't exist.
You've used 20 minutes.
Thank you, Judge. This is in the Code of Criminal Procedure. But they want to treat the truth and evidence like hot and cold running water. When it suits their purposes, they'll turn it on. When it doesn't, they're just going to pretend it doesn't exist. We don't think y'all need to bother yourselves with this. It doesn't help our theory of the case. Let's look at all of the reasonable things. And I've got to sit down here very quickly. Lights on car, holler Dallas police, show us your hands multiple times, pull the car up. Remember, you can't block the car. Siren, air horn, continued calling, try to open the door. They don't shoot when the car gets hit. They don't shoot when they try to run through the fence. They continue to holler. He perceives the risk. He shoots. Now, what's the first thing? You can go back and play the body cams of this. What's the first thing? And I didn't have a stopwatch on it, but I guarantee you it wasn't, 3 seconds. What's the first thing that comes out of Hess's mouth after he fires those shots? Shots fired, because that's a requirement anytime an officer discharges a firearm, that be reported. So he's got it on the radio. Calls for an ambulance, and is everybody all right? What does that say about his perspective? What does that tell you about his judgment? And let's compare that to Virgilio Rosales. They get him out of the car. They do what prudent officers do. Walk toward me, walk toward me, walk toward me, get on the ground. Is there a gun in that car? No. He's lying to the end. He's hoping that they will just put him back in that seat and go about their business so he can get his hand on that gun. That's the mindset of Virgilio Rosales. He's lying to the end. Again, compare that to the judgment of Christopher Hess. Folks, y'all, I've got other stuff I could talk about, but I'd start repeating myself. What you need to know is, in this particular case, of the people that were called to testify, Aaron Evans, not saying that there was no threat. Again, she can read it back. Not saying that there was no threat. Lick war. No doubt Hess prevented someone from getting hurt that night. Strongly believe the vehicle would have injured a police officer. Hopkins, situation posed a risk, and I told them I would have shot. Joe Samples. She had a lot of opportunities to get out of the car and stop. Why are they not complying? Officer Kimball tells you, I'm worried about what's going to happen next. Christopher Hess. If Hess not in front, he would have fired. Believe officers are at risk. They didn't call him. They didn't want y'all to hear that. And you had a chance to observe him. You had a chance to observe his demeanor, his judgment, his common sense. Folks, I'm going to ask you to take that charge back, to read it. If you've got any questions, get her to play it back. And again, ask yourself the question. We have no burden of proof in this case. But we've done everything we can possibly do to bring you all the witnesses that will paint a picture of what went on out there that night. And this man right here, actions were taken to protect the others that were out there. And again, I get back to the statement of my wife. Isn't it ironic that he's here because of a situation created by a lawless, criminal, we don't care about anything but ourselves. I'm going to ask you to find him not guilty, not because I say he's not guilty, but because when you read the law in this case and you apply it to the facts, all of the facts, that's what verdict is called for. Thank you again for your patience. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prosper.